Mervyn Silva is Sri Lanka's Minister for Public Relations, and this is what he has to say about the country's journalists.
When I first saw Mervyn Silva saying what he said on television, I was disgusted. Frankly, that's an understatement. I was shocked.
The statement has to be taken very seriously. This is a man who has said things that he has gone ahead and done. We know that he led the assault on the state broadcaster a couple of years ago. So this is a man who has a history of violence. When he says something, as he himself says, you can be certain that he means it very seriously.
The minister's diatribe provoked surprisingly little in the way of reaction from his own government. We contacted the government 3 times for a comment. No one was made available. Silva's threats were provoked by the UN Human Rights Commission's decision to investigate Sri Lanka for war crimes. The crimes alleged took place in the final decisive battle against Tamil separatists 3 years ago, a war the Sri Lankan government locked journalists out of. That period was difficult and dangerous for Sri Lankan reporters, and the relative peace that has followed has not been much better.
Literally dozens of journalists have disappeared or been killed. At the very start of the final offensive in January 2009, one of the country's leading editors, Lasantha Wickrematunge, he was the editor of the Sunday Leader and been a vocal critic of the government, and he was gunned down by unknown assailants. And 2 days later, his newspaper published an editorial on the front page, which he'd written before his death, predicting his death. And that has set a pattern, which was actually a pattern was established, and that pattern has continued.
It's now over 3 years since the war ended. And you would think that this government could well leave the media alone. They won the war, but they continue to be aggressive. And that is because they are clearly on a path to authoritarianism. They will continue to pummel and coerce or even cover the media into subjugation, which they have in fact very successfully done in this country.
Success for the government can sometimes be defined by what Sri Lankan media do not cover. The national media, including state-owned television, essentially ignored the allegations of war crimes the UN is now focusing on. Some news outlets outside Sri Lanka are still on the story. Britain's Channel 4 has aired 2 films called Sri Lanka's Killing Fields. Knowing that Sri Lankans were not seeing the story covered in this way, Channel 4 took the unusual step of waiving its copyright on the film, posting it, so that Sri Lankans could see it online or through other broadcasters.
Our film is available on the internet, and some people can get to it. But the trouble is that the Sri Lankan government are controlling what comes into the country viciously. Recently, BBC Sinhala service and the BBC Tamil service, which used to be retransmitted on state radio, have been blocked. They've stopped doing it, because there is criticism in there, and they can't afford their own people to hear it. They are lying to their own people, and the more that their own people realise they're being lied to by their government, the more unhappy they're going to be.
The Sri Lankan government's counter-offensive included an online rebuttal,
doctored footage and deliberate lies,
an attempt to debunk Channel 4's